Vintage Books Live. Tonight, we're really excited to have Angela M. Sanders. Angela writes cozy mysteries, and she has a new book that just came out a couple months ago, and we finally were able to get her here. And so we're really excited to talk to her. But it is the third or fourth in the series, Angela.
It's the fourth that just came
Okay,
out.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So if we could start out just by kind of giving people watching an idea of the whole sort of premise of the whole series, and then we can talk about the book that just came out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the series is called the Witch Way Librarian series because the protagonist's name is a librarian named Josie Way. So that's how we get Witch Way. In fact, that's why I chose her last name for that very reason. And she, in book one, she starts out working at the Library of Congress and overhears something she's not supposed to hear. So she goes on the lam, finds herself a librarian job in an obscure, teeny tiny town, Wilfred, Oregon. Wilfred's so small that it's lost its incorporation. Teeny tiny little town, and her library is in the old timber baron's mansion, which had been converted to library. She lives up on the top floor. When she crosses the Continental Divide, something happens, something snaps in her, and little does she know that her magic, a spell which had been contained in her magic, is released. And now she has these bizarre powers. Books seem to be talking to her, and no one to tell her what the heck is going on. And then, of course, we get a couple dead bodies. So Angela's library also is threatened with demolition. So she's got to save the library, find a murderer, and deal with magic and this black cat that's shown up from nowhere.
And the black cat wouldn't be based on any black cats,
that might show up in front of the screen. Yeah. I do feel a kinship.
Oh, excuse me. So, sorry, just coughing, maybe lose my entire train of thought. So the first book, she is like kind of her discovering all this and moving.
Right. So she discovers.
The second one is I can't remember what the second one was. I know what the third one was.
Yeah. Well, the second one, okay, so let's have let's see if this will come up on the screen here. Here's the first.
Oh, yeah.
Bait and witch.
Yes, okay.
So she discovers she's a witch. Has no one really. In fact, her whole family are witches, but she's a particularly powerful one. Every few generations, a witch pops up who has a lot of power. And her power, she learns, derives from books because she loves books. She's a librarian. And when you think about a book, I mean, you think about like all the author's energy that goes into it. The readers take these little black and white things on paper and create worlds in their brain. And so these books, all that energy becomes what basically gives her magic force. And she, at the end of Bait and Witch, I don't think this is revealing too much. Her mother sends her a big trunk of letters that her grandmother, who was also a powerful witch, had written for her before she died, not knowing if Josie would ever come into her power. So all she has are these letters and a pretty close relationship with books that will, I mean, if you came into her library and you're thinking, I'm looking for a mystery, maybe a cozy mystery, she might say, I've got just the booklet on bunions for you, because she knows. Bunions, books have told her. So 7-Year Witch, number 2.
Okay, that's the title I couldn't remember.
I know, 7-Year Witch. I know, thinking of these witch titles is something else too. The 7-Year Witch, there is Sam Wilfred from the old family is the love interest eventually, and he shows up in this book with a wife, and a baby. Whole story there though. Witch and Famous. Let's see there.
Yeah, that was the one before this recent one.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. This one, a movie star with a book club. I was kind of thinking of Reese Witherspoon type.
Yeah. There's a few of them now.
Yeah. She goes to town to film an interview, and hijinks ensue. And then Witch Upon a Star is Josie's sister Jean. They're building a retreat center in Wilfred, and Josie's sister Jean comes out for a yoga retreat. It's not a yoga retreat, it's a life coaching retreat. She wants to be like a wellness coaching person. with the famous Cookie Masterson, and a couple bodies also drop with that
Well,
one.
there have to be bodies. I mean, that's
They
just
have
part
to
of the
be.
deal.
Finally, in this book, there's a certain point where you just have to acknowledge it. So I have the knitting team decides, the knitting club who meets at the library decides they're going to start kind of their own informal chamber of commerce and find a way to market Wilfred. So they're using the murders, like people are dying to come to Wilfred, and too bad we don't have a music shop. We could call it Blunt Instrument, stuff like that.
Oh, that's fun.
You
That's
gotta,
fun because I think that's the one thing that, we're always kind of ha-haing about, like shows like Murder She Wrote. It's like, well, if she comes to town, you better leave because
there's
someone's
nobody
gonna
else left in town. If you are gonna DIE. I know, and you have to ask yourself, like, why is a librarian solving murders anyway? It's always a challenge, but she's magic, so she's got a little edge.
So when you're sitting down, and we'll get to the magic a little bit because I want to, like, we haven't talked about that too much. Some of these questions we probably talked about a little bit last time, but like when you sit down to construct a mystery. So I've talked to a couple of the other mystery author, Emmeline Duncan and Mary Kalei, and we've been talking about, like, with your writing style and how you do things, like how do you construct the mystery part of it so that it is believable and so things have a logical sequence? Do you like plan that all out ahead of time, or do you kind of let some of it happen organically and plan some of it out? How does that work for you?
I plan a lot of it, and then a lot of it just does happen organically. And as far as believability, I mean, it's a writing mysteries, especially cozy mysteries, is kind of an odd thing. I mean, she is a witch librarian. Is that really very believable?
Yeah.
Actually, I think I've met some librarians I'm sure are amazing, wonderful witches. So
yeah.
I say that. But I mean, there's some stuff that's pretty ridiculous. I was talking with my dad once, trying to get an idea about HVAC ventilation, because I wanted the cat to go in this, would there be ventilation to the outside? Could I do that? And he said, Angie, you're writing a book about a witch librarian. How realistic does this have to be? So, I mean, there is that.
Yeah. And I think actually the word believable is probably not the right word. It's more that writing it with enough story logic that you can suspend your disbelief, like you can get caught up in it instead of having, little breaks in the logic and go, wait a minute, that doesn't work. So
I think you were totally right. You're totally right. Story logic is a great word for it. It's like you create the world, and within the world, there just needs to be a certain consistency of tone and possibility and things like that. So what I do then when I am writing a mystery is usually I have either an idea for a great death or a premise, some sort of odd premise. And then, so I'll start with that. And then I take a big piece of paper. I have a pad that's sort of my special thinking pad. And I make a big X so that I have 4 boxes. And then I have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and Act 4. And Acts 2 and 3 are really just Act 2 split in the middle. But I want something interesting, a twist, something to happen at the end of Act 2. So that's why I split it.
Yeah.
So I know in Act 1, I need to introduce the situation. I've got to introduce the town and the characters again. And by the end of Act 1, Josie needs to be committed to solving this murder. And then in Act 2, she has some kind of idea of how she's going to solve it, some sort of idea of where things are going. By the end of Act 2, that's all changed. And not only has it changed, it's got like a lot worse. So in Act 3, she's thinking, there's no way I'm going to get out of here. And maybe I'm going to be dead, or something terrible is going to happen.
Yeah.
By the end of Act 3, she's cooked up some kind of dramatic plan, and the plan either goes well or the plan does not go well. And she's got to get out of there by the skin of her teeth, which is more often. So that's kind of how I do it. And then I'll have some ideas of some like set piece scenes, some things that seem really dramatic and interesting or hilarious. One of the beauties of writing cozy mystery is that you can be funny. And, I think life is funny. So I really, so I love that part of writing cozy mysteries. People have asked me, like, do you think you would write a different kind of mystery? And as long as I could be funny, then I would. Otherwise,
Yeah, no, there's definitely different. I mean, cozy, I think, gives you license to have um different genres sort of overlap a little bit. Like it's like cozies can overlap with humor, they can overlap with romance. I mean, there's some pieces in cozies that you maybe wouldn't find in something more gritty,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is kind of fun. Yeah.
I think you bring up that totally good point.
Yeah.
But then once I have those sort of four general ideas of where things are go, I will just take index cards with me everywhere and start to think about the book and think about scenes, and just jot them down in index cards. And then I toss them into a bowl. I
No.
show you. Bowl actually has some other stuff in it right now too, but it is the bowl that I got it at Goodwill. It's silver plate. It's from 1958, and it is the Women's Forum Woman of the Year to Evangeline Philbin.
Oh, that's great.
That's where I put the cards.
That's
And
really fun.
I know. And then I actually used Evangeline Philbin in this book. Her name, she comes up here.
Oh, that's fun. Have you ever looked up her name to see like
Yep.
who she really was?
I even saw floor plans of her house. She had this great little house in Laurelhurst, old spinster. She got in a huge fight with another women's organization that was like all over the papers. And I know.
That's really right.
Her house was in Better Homes and Gardens, and she had a place in Laurelhurst, so I saw the layout. And then she also got every year she would take a bunch of deaf students to the big old Chinese restaurant that used to be on the corner of Stark and 82nd. So that was also in the paper. So yeah, I learned a little bit about her. And then the book just grows from there. And my philosophy is you write that first draft, and then you get it right through revision.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like you're kind of in between, and I've talked about this with several writers, that we've talked about how the fact that you have the whole plotter and pantser, and most people aren't all the way one way or all the way the other way. Would you call yourself more one way or the other way though?
Probably more plotter than pantser. It's just
Okay.
more patient for me, but I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
plot excessively. But I think going all the way, I think pantsers especially are pretty defensive about their position. Like, I figure if I don't know the ending, the reader will be surprised too. Well, that might be, but the whole thing about a mystery is it needs to be like algebra. You bring all these different threads together, and it needs to all work. And one of the things that I consistently get in the trade reviews is that the mysteries are complicated, that they're interesting mysteries, and it's really hard to do that off the cuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what really ends up happening for most people is the same amount of writing and revision happen for both plotters and pantsers. I think that plotters tend to fine tune at the beginning, and so maybe they won't have quite as much to do it later. That's not always true, but that maybe not as much. Whereas pantsers just go ahead and write, but then they're going to have to go back and fine tune and look for logic holes a little bit more later. So I think it's like we get to the same place at the end. It's just how do you get there? But yeah, I don't really think there's anybody who's all the way one way or all the way the other way, because even if you're pantsing it, you kind of you're starting with some kind of an idea.
Yeah, some kind of idea, maybe an idea about the end too, or at least what the end is.
Yeah.
I know Jeffrey Deaver is supposed to be a pretty thorough plotter, and he has plots that'll be like 40, 50 pages long. But yeah. That's for mysteries.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I keep bringing it up, especially with the mystery writers that I talk to, because I feel like there's a certain amount of, like, every story has to have a logical story. It has to have a logical plot, in the sense that, like we said, the story logic has to make sense. You can't have one character being one way the whole time and then suddenly being a totally different way without some kind of explanation. And so it has to be logical. But I think I'm always fascinated to ask mystery writers in particular how they manage it, because you do have to construct some kind of sort of logic puzzle in the middle of it. in order to have it be a mystery. And that's a really different piece than just constructing some kind of storyline or whatever.
Yeah, it
And
really is.
so,
And I feel like I can tell when I read something if it was written by a plotter or a pantser, especially with mysteries. You can see there's scenes sometimes that, I feel like, oh, a pantser must have written this because this book has sort of, the boat has kind of fallen into the eddy for a minute.
yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah,
it's just like, this really
yeah.
moving the story forward. And yeah.
Yeah, that, and I think sometimes there's an introduction of all kinds of extra characters or extra storylines that maybe don't need to be there, and you're kind of like, why did that?
It's happening.
Like,
Yeah.
you can do that, but as long as it makes sense at the end why it was there. But if you get to all the way to the end, you're like, I still don't understand why this person
Yeah.
exists.
Yeah, why was waffle such a big deal?
Yeah, exactly. So the magic piece of it we haven't talked about before, and I'm curious to know, first of all, like, what made you want to put magic in this particular series? Like, why magic? Why did you think that that would add to it? What made you want to do that?
Well, I have a pretty pragmatic answer to that, and that is that the editor, so my agent suggested I write this series because he had talked to the editor-in-chief at Kensington and said, what do you want to see? And he said, I want to see a series featuring a witch librarian and her magic cat. So then my agent called me and said, what do you think about, maybe writing a proposal that has a witch librarian and her magic cat? And I thought, no, I don't want to do that. I know, I really don't. But I didn't want to tell him no right off. So I said, I'll call you in a week. And during that week, I thought about it, and it grew bigger and richer in my head. I just never thought I'd be writing paranormal mysteries. But by the end of the week, I was like, who do I think I am? This is a fabulous idea. I'm just totally into it. So that'll change. So it wasn't an idea that I came up with, but it is an idea that now I really have a wonderful time writing.
Yeah. What, how much like planning did you put into, and what kind of planning did you put into deciding like how her magic was going to manifest itself? What are the rules of her magic? How does it play out in the books? And that kind of stuff. Like, what kind of thought process and research process went into that part of it?
Well, I know that reading books with witches who just like have a magic wand. Well, I knew there were two things I wanted to avoid. One was the straight Wicca situation, where somebody decides they're going to write about a book, they do a bunch of research on Wicca, and they just like have a bunch of Wiccans. That's great. I think Wiccans are terrific, but I didn't want to write that. I wanted to write about magic that I feel is really real. Not that Wicca magic is not real, but I wanted to write about the magic that sort of comes from energy.
Yeah.
I really believe in that. I knew the other thing I knew I wanted to avoid was the magic where it's like, poof, here, have the salt shaker fly into my hand, and I'll make the door open, ding, or let's put a curse on him. That was just, there's a lot of problems with that. And the number one being that you're trying to find, you've got a puzzle to solve and you've got a murderer to find in these books. And if you can just say, blink, there's a murderer, and now they're all tied up, and so I wanted to make sure that I found a magic system that felt almost real, like something that you really could see happening, and something that related to just the energy in the world, because that, I feel like, what you put your attention to is going to give something back to you.
Yeah.
So I was pondering this, thinking, what do? I don't really know anything about writing paranormals. And walking up the steps at another read through on Mississippi here in Portland, for anybody outside of Portland's watch, it was a used bookstore that is, I think, out of business, or they do online business now.
Yeah.
But on the steps were carved sayings from different authors. And there was one from, let's see, I'm going to read it to you straight because I put it then as the dedication in Bait and Witch. There was from Alice Hoffman, it said, books may well be the only true magic. And when I read that, it just all clicked into place for me. And I thought, that's it.
Yay.
She
That's
loves
so cool.
books. I
Yeah.
know. And it's kind of a great saying anyway. It's like she loves books. And if you think about just all the energy that goes into books and the story and how vast and diverse books are, it felt to me like that could be a good source of her magic.
Yeah. Well, and I've always appreciated when authors think about, like, how would this really work? You know, because, and I know a lot of fantasy authors put a lot of thought into this sort of thing too, is like, you know, it follow, you know, if you follow the laws of nature enough that you can't make something out of nothing, that energy and that stuff has to come from somewhere.
Right.
It tends to feel more real than just the, you know, I'm going to say a magic spell and something's going to appear out of nowhere and it didn't really cost me anything and there wasn't any energy required to
Yeah.
produce that. It just happens. That's
Right.
always felt much less believable.
Mhm.
And the systems where there's a source of the magic
Mhm.
has always felt more real, which
And
I
I think
love.
anybody reading a book, it probably enjoys books and will understand too about the energy, about how
Yeah.
when you are reading, you are recreating that world in your mind. You are making up your own movie with the sounds, the smells, everything in your mind. And that's real energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So,
I like the idea of, like, what you were talking about of, you know, handing a person the book about bunions. I think
uh,
that it's the wonderful thing about that too is that it's close enough to something that could happen for real. Like it's, you know,
mhm,
because there's a little bit of observation, and
mhm.
so the magic just has to push a little bit further than reality and
Yes,
not so far from what
yes,
is
right.
real
Because
that you can be like, well, you know, I could believe that could
yeah.
happen, you know, and yeah,
Initially, Josie thinks that, oh, well, she's just been exposed to a lot of books. So there's just stuff that's in her mind she doesn't even know is there. And then she realizes, no, there's actually other stuff going on here.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And I like that idea. And I think if you think about the strange coincidences in your own life, or, how one person just seems to grow the perfect zucchinis and the other one can't ever get them even, it's just like, where does that come from?
yeah,
It's a sort
yeah,
of love of the soil, a love of plants, and that's kind of a
yeah,
magic in and of itself.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I think that anybody who really cultivates a skill or a talent,
Hmm.
there is almost something magical about being able to do certain, you know, sew something or, you know, write a computer program or whatever, that there's some kind of, it just feels like some kind of energy from somewhere else. And so, yeah, I really love that.
They do, or people with animals. There's some people who are just
Yes.
magical with
Yeah.
animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does the cat, so I remember the editor of it at the beginning said they wanted the cat to be magical too. So how does the cat figure into all of this?
Also, then I didn't want the classic companion to, oh gosh, will you help me with this word that everybody knows? The animal who is the animal for the witch.
Oh, the familiar. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I totally know that word. It's been a long day. Oh,
Yeah.
I've been zooming the whole day long. So I didn't want just like, this is my familiar and I will send him out to do things. So the cat has kind of a mysterious background. Inside the library is a big portrait of the library's founder, Marilyn Wilfred. She was the daughter of the original Thurston Wilfred, who founded Wilfred. And she, who was the youngest daughter and had inherited the house and decided to turn it into a library and made the upstairs her living quarters. So there's a huge oil portrait of her in a flapper gown in the 1920s hanging above the front door. And at her feet is this black cat. And in other old photographs, there are some black cats too. But, also Rodney just sort of appeared from nowhere. He was named by the intern at the library, Rodney, and he's a black cat. I don't really know the history of these cats, but his magic is that he responds to magic, but he does have one trick, one kind of big trick. And that is that Josie can, if she focuses, go into his body. So she
Ah,
can, it's really handy when you need to get in a small space.
yeah. That's convenient. I like that.
So you can send the cat. That's the one. That's one kind of outrageous piece of magic that I have in the books. So she can, and when she does it, she's kind of checked out wherever she is physically, and she has to battle Rodney's will because he's easily distracted by things. But she can.
Oh, I love that.
And he's like at his top, he's got part of a torn ear, but he's vain about his coat and a little bit of a troublemaker.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's
So when
fun.
people say like she confesses to her sister that she has this cat and she can do things with the cat and she's like, oh, is that your familiar? And Josie always says, no, he's my cat friend. That's what she calls
Yeah.
it.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
fun. Did you I had asked Angela to pick a passage that kind of is representative of the magic in the book. So I'm going to ask her to read that now if she's got it.
I'll read you. So this is one of my favorite magical things. This is from Witch and Famous. We'll see if we can get it there.
Yeah.
And Josie knows she needs help from the books. And sometimes she can just go and say, books, tell me everything you know about whatever. And things will fly in on a desk and she can get information that way. But this way she needed help thinking about things. So she's experimenting with her magic here. Like, can she get help thinking about the mystery from characters in books? So let's see. Okay, so what should I ask the books? If I asked all the library's fictional detectives to report to Old Man Thurston's office, the office would be too full to squeeze into. No, I needed a sorting mechanism. I calmed myself and focused my energy. Rodney, perkier now that he sensed magic, rubbed against my calves. I pressed my finger to my tingling birthmark. I drew 3 long breaths, holding each one a few seconds before releasing it. I opened my eyes again, and the lamps throughout the library glowed with the force of my magic. No, I whispered, back into the books. The lights flickered, and the library was dark once again. Then books shimmered like fireflies from their rooms. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the energy cycle through my body as warm as sun at the beach. From his amped purring, I knew Rodney felt it too. It was time. Books, I said. A cycle of cries and yeses whooshed through the library in different voices, some murmuring bass, others high, some with accents, others nearly singing. We're going to try something new. I want to speak with your characters. Can you do that? My body thrummed with energy as the book said, yes, yes, yes. First, I want the hard-boiled detectives to meet in Old Man Thurston's office and make yourself as one character. On second thought, I added, sober, please. Would it work? I bit my lip as the bookshelves groaned below me. Popular fiction and streaks of green energy pulsed like jellyfish to Old Man Thurston's office. In their trail whisked a few trench coats and fedoras. Yes, I focused again and kept my energy calm, authoritative. Next, we'll have girl detectives. Nancy, Trixie, Cherry, that means you. A roadster and a magnifying glass accompanied by giggles streamed pink across the atrium into the office. Rodney, all the way from the 3rd floor hall, batted a paw at it. One more. This one would be the trickiest and might result in the most infighting. I'd have to be careful. Finally, we'll have British detectives from Sherlock to the Golden Age. Become as one. A meerschaum pipe, a deerstalker cap glimmered silver among a monocle, mustache comb, and cocktail shaker, followed by a butler. Toddling behind them with a bag of knitting was an elderly lady. Oh boy, this could get interesting. I took the stairs down the atrium, my body electric with energy. I wasn't used to drumming up so much magic, and it rattled my muscles and fizzed through my blood. The doorway to Old Man Thurston's office shimmered, and I entered to find 3 small characters on the broad mahogany desk. They glowed like Barbie-sized holograms. The hard-boiled detective was easy to identify. He sat in a worn leather club chair the size of a grapefruit and wore his fedora pulled forward. He smoked a cigarette. True to the novel, he had Sam Spade's devilish face rather than Humphrey Bogart's basset hound expression, and his trench coat could have belonged to Philip Marlowe, William Crane, or any of a dozen other fictional gumshoes. The girl detective edged away from the cigarette smoke and looked at me eagerly with a freckle-smattered face. She wore a poodle skirt and Angora sweater. Titian-hued waves bounced at her shoulders. I caught the hard-boiled detective checking her out. Don't get any ideas, I warned him. Hard-boiled and girl detective, it turned out all right, but a glance told me I'd blown it with Golden Age. The Golden Age detective was a Mr. Potato Head of different sleuth features. I think it was a he, wore a plum silk smoking jacket and a monocle like Lord Peter Wimsey might have. However, he was smoking Sherlock Holmes' pipe, and a deerstalker cap was on his head, on top of what looked like Miss Marple's, or maybe Maud Silver's, gray curls and Hercule Poirot's manicured mustache. He was bulky and he leaned on a walking stick. I had the sense of a butler waiting in the ether. The detective advanced a step and a deep Gothic-style chair appeared behind him. With a sigh, he settled in. I'll just stop there.
That's great. That's really fun. I love all the Easter eggs in that passage because I think any of us who like mysteries or like even if it's not books, even if it's like television shows, that you can recognize all the favorite characters in there. So that was fun.
Yeah, it's fun to write too.
I'm going to take this down because the drilling has begun.
No.
They're trying to fix a gate, I think. So I think I noticed when I was looking at books today that you have more coming out in the near future. Is it more Witch Way mysteries?
I do. I have, so the next Witch Way mystery, number 5 in the series, called Gone with the Witch, comes out as a March release. And then I'm working on number 6 in the series, The Witch is Back, right now. And that'll be, I don't know when that
this is like a side note, but do you come up with the titles yourself, or is this like a you and your editor get together and scheme as to what the good titles are?
I propose the titles, and so far the editor has accepted them all. Like The Witch is Back, I wasn't sure, like, is that just a little too suggestive? He's like, I love it, it's great. So he's taking it.
Good. That's fun.
I was feeling like I was at the end of the Witch Tether, but a reader sent me a huge list of great titles, like
fun. That's very cool.
Witch a Tent, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Books.
That's
and
it's fun to see people get invested in it too. So
yeah, and it was great just because some people are better than others at titles, and I'm not so good at them.
Yeah, titles are hard.
So we'll have at least 6 books in the series, and then I'll find out later this summer if it's renewed, and it's looking good at the moment. Yeah.
And is this the only books you're working on? I mean, it's plenty because you're pretty much doing like 2 a year, or
so I'm doing
one every 18 months, or so that gets a lot. So
it's a good pace. I'm starting work on something else too that I can't really talk about right now, but
that's okay.
It's possible that I'll have some other work coming out as well.
Yeah.
But for now, that's that. Yeah.
So the other thing that I promised to ask about is, I know that another thing that you really enjoy, as evidenced by the index card holder, is like vintage and thrifting and stuff. And I'm curious, since vintage has been kind of just sort of holding up small local businesses in the Vancouver, Portland metro area, and just kind of celebrating all of the small businesses. If you have any favorite places or favorite even like neighborhoods where there's several little stores or something that you like to go looking for treasures.
Well, first of all, I noticed that Vintage Books is a great store right next to you.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Go into and look at their things. Last time I was there, and next time I go, I'll be looking too. I know it.
For those of you who haven't been to the store in a bit, we have a brand new. We've had the thrift store there a couple doors down for a long time, and they have they're truly like a thrift store. They've got all kinds of just fun, different, random things that you never know what's going to be there. And then relatively recently, in the last 6 months or so, a antique store moved next door, and they just have super fun curation of like different kinds of antiques. The truck pulls up, like several times a week, and I think it's, they change out the window every few days, so it's always fun to just kind of look and see what new stuff they have in there. But
I mean, that's part of it. It's sort of the same idea. Why I really like Vintage Books is because of the old books there.
Yeah.
I just love something with a history to it, and being able to hold something in your hand that somebody else read and enjoyed, and then look at that old typeface and
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I
With
really like.
that, and sometimes there's inscriptions like, for
Oh,
people's birthdays or Christmas, or,
and if you're
it's just
super
kind of
lucky,
fun.
you'll get a shopping list or something that'll fall
Yeah.
out. Old
Yeah.
coupons. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
love that. I just love things with a history that feel like they've had a life before. And that's why I really like thrifting. I live in Portland, so I don't do very much thrifting in Vancouver. I also, I know nobody's going to believe this, but cozy mystery writers don't make giant bundles of money. So
Yeah.
I tend to go to the sort of lower rent sort of thrift places.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Village Merchants here in Portland, I really like. Rerun is another great store. Those are two I really like. And then there's another one close by on Division. So that if you go to the Division area of Portland, you can go to Artifact and Village Merchants, right there, and do some.
Yeah. Yeah. How far in on Division is it?
See, Village Merchants is about 42nd, and
Okay.
Artifact is
Yeah,
maybe.
that gives me an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people rightfully are reluctant to brave Portland traffic, which I get as someone who used to work in Portland a long time ago and has watched the traffic get worse and worse. But getting to Division from 205 is actually not
Yeah,
difficult.
that's not too bad. You
So
can just zip
yeah,
right down it from 205.
yeah.
And
Downtown can be a little scary sometimes just because trying to find parking down there is very
oh yeah,
intense.
downtown. I don't think a lot
But
of budget to do the.
yeah,
Yeah, a lot of
yeah.
places.
But Division and Hawthorne has lots of cool shops, and in Vancouver, the north end of Main Street has a lot of cool
Little antique shops.
antique shops. So
I haven't been out there for a while. I should go though. I know it'd be really
but,
fun.
yeah, I think that they've successfully sort of revitalized that part of town, and so there's all kinds of cute little shops and restaurants and all kinds of fun little places, so that's kind of fun
That
too.
is fun. And then when you buy stuff that's secondhand, it just feels like a good thing for the environment.
Yeah. Yes,
You
exactly.
get this history, but you also, you're not buying some piece of trash that's going to end up in a landfill.
Yeah. Yeah. How often like, this is just pure curiosity on my part, but how often do physical objects that you either have or that you've come across or places, how often do they show up in your, how often does having that touch point and, having something show up in a book that's an actual physical thing that you are familiar with?
Because I do love old things and I love physical things, and the Witch Way Librarian series, I realized right away that Josie was going to have to. So when her magic is bound, her senses are sort of dulled. But now that she's got her magic, I'm thinking now it's time for her to really get aesthetic. So I'm giving her a nice sort of maximalist aesthetic where she likes old stuff and puts, old fringe Chinese shawls around and has a Victorian couch, and she's got old stuff because I like it, and then I
Yeah.
have the pleasure
Yeah.
of writing about it. So Bob
Yeah.
has to show
Yeah.
me. If she picks up a coffee cup, I know what that coffee cup looks like. I might have
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. I love when those kind of tangible things like make it into. I think that makes writing more real feeling too, even if you as a reader aren't aware that the author has based it on something that they're holding in their hands. I think there's just something more alive about it when it's not fully just pulled out of your brain. I know when I write about, like science related stuff or animals or whatever, I'm going out and looking for like videos and pictures because I want to know like what does it look like when they move, and like it's just so much more real if you have some sort of tangible
Mhm.
thing to base it on. So
It is, and a lot of times it makes your writing more specific too. So when somebody's when you could say she um, use the or the beautiful old silver teapot to pour tea. Okay, well, that doesn't really tell you anything. It's a beautiful
yeah, yeah,
but if it's like, if the teapot, sure, she lifted the silver narcissus that held the lid of the teapot and poured it from its curved spout. Now you're looking at it.
yeah,
Now you're
yeah,
seeing it.
exactly.
When you
And
know,
those are things that, like, I think you sometimes, those are the nuances I think in writing that, um, trying to think of how to say this, but sometimes people will overdo adjectives
Mhm.
when they're just learning about writing because they want to be descriptive and they want to make the readers feel like they're there. And I think what it really ends up being is the placement of very specific adjectives and very specific details that ends up making you feel like you're really there, not so much way too many of them. Or
and the kind of details that your protagonist would notice.
yes,
Protagonist
they
doesn't
have to
care
make
about
sense.
spots,
Yeah,
then yeah, the specific
yeah,
thing you'll notice is that how weedy the tea is and why do people drink this anyway? That sort of.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because if you notice all the details, then the reader doesn't know what they're supposed to pay attention to. But but
Mystery. That could be a good way to like throw in red herring too.
yeah, that's true too. It's like I think of how, like, in a I actually don't read a ton of mystery, but I love watching like British mysteries on television. And they're very careful to show you specific things happening,
Mhm.
as a way to kind of make you think, well, it could be this person because of this, or it could be this, at the beginning of a show, there's casting this really wide net and they're showing you very specific things about each person to make you think, oh, maybe it's that person, or maybe it's that person.
Right.
And you
Yeah.
do the same things in books, you like little details that you're dropping. You're like, huh, I'm supposed to pay attention to that. Wait, maybe that's
Distraction, red
important.
herrings, and other stories that you might not know about. And Agatha Christie was brilliant for doing that. She would have the main murder mystery and some suspicious people, and maybe one of the suspects actually had a jewel theft ring going on. It's like
Yes.
there's a whole
Yeah.
different something big that's wound into
And
it.
it would have nothing to do with the actual mystery, but it would get uncovered at the same time. And
And
so
the people
you
would look
almost had these
suspicious.
layers twisted all around. And yeah,
And
yeah,
that's why I think, you need to build a mystery because otherwise they won't be twisted around. And
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think, I think that there was one. No, I think that's probably it. I'm looking over to see if there's any questions. Let's see yeah, somebody was asking about like showing a second personality or good and bad, but I think we've probably answered that in the sense that um like she's not a bad witch or evil or powerful or anything like
That
that.
was
So
good. Yeah, she was raised in
yeah,
a Catholic family, and and her grandmother, who is this real powerful witch, considered herself a God-fearing woman.
yeah,
She was
yeah,
magical. What can you do?
yeah.
And then
How did you balance that a little bit? Because I love that. I love that. Why do these things have to be opposed to each other? In history, they're always opposed to each other. And
even the
all
black,
the stories of the witch hunts are always, the church kind of opposing this. But what if they're not, mutually exclusive? And so I
mhm.
like,
I feel
yeah,
like Josie's magic isn't a religion. It's just something she has. Some people can,
yeah,
we have our senses, and she just has this ability to tune into books and use that energy. And it has nothing to do with her, whether she believes in a god or what kind of god that is or any of it. It's
yeah, yeah,
people are sort of scared, and there are certainly witches who are pagan and
yeah,
participate in something that maybe feels like it's threatening to establish religion. But yeah, my kind of magic, it's something I feel like everybody's got a
yeah,
tiny bit of.
yeah. I
So
love that.
what's your kind of magic, do you think?
If I had any kind of magic, it would probably be related to like plants and herbs and growing stuff and
Oh, I love
farm animals.
that. I love that. That's the
um
best
I'm
magic.
not as good as that all that well, the animals I'm okay at, but the plant stuff I'm not as good as I want to be. But it just, anything growing is very cool. I enjoy that a lot. So
Well, I wish you were closer because I got some questions for you.
I
My own garden.
probably don't have any answers. Oh, MJ. Let's see. I'm looking. Oh, it's somebody. That's her name. The person. I'm sorry. It might not be her. The person's name is MJ.
Uh-huh.
And it looks like they are working on a book that has a person that has different personality arcs. So that was why they were asking that question.
Oh, yeah.
So that's actually, I mean, we can segue off of that a little bit and talk about because there, you don't have that in these books, but there still is an aspect where you have to figure out the different personalities in the book. And how does that come about?
Secondary characters in my books do have character arcs. In each one of the books, there is a character who has to challenge a particular view they have of the world. Josie is just sort of our, she's observing this and taking this in and being our narrator in a lot of those sorts of things. But yeah, and each of them, like in Witch Upon a Star, the latest one, her sister has always been sort of viewed as the helpless baby of the family. And she has to see herself as strong, and other people need to let her be strong. And so that's sort of the change that needs to happen by the end. And so I do have that. I do have that happening for the secondary characters.
Does that help you? Because I think another thing that I was wondering that I didn't remember to ask earlier is that I have the other mystery people have been getting this one from me too, because a series is really cool and wonderful and lets you explore all kinds of things about a character, but it also is a commitment that means you've got to keep revisiting the same character over and over again. And one of the things that has to happen, we always say has to happen in stories, is there has to be character growth by the end. Do you find that in a series where you have the same main character, does some of that character growth that's happening by the end up being the side characters more than the main character?
The side characters regularly have something that they need to change their thinking on. And then Josie has challenges that strengthen her. There are a couple of, there's the romantic subplot, which takes over about 4 books. And then there's another subplot, which is a 3-book arc. So hopefully I will get renewed for book 7, or that one won't be resolved.
Oh no, you'll have to write a little like post for everybody. Well, we just know that it's going to get reviewed. So we're going to think positive thoughts.
In those, she faces a sort of challenge, which then cause her to look at her own beliefs. And then in some of the books, like in Witch and Famous, the magic in each of them, there's a letter from the grandmother talking about the certain type of magic that
I forgot about the letters, but yeah.
Witch and Famous is about love magic. And so Josie has to think about, she has to learn about love. What is love? How much of love is selfish and how much of it is, there are some little lessons in there, but, and they do affect the way she lives her life. But I feel like some of the strongest arcs are in the sub characters. But it's tricky. I mean, when you are writing a series, you've got to always, and you never know when that series is going to end. So you've got to be larding your town with new people.
Yeah, because I was going to say, it sounds like you get, and I know this has been true for other people that I've talked to too, that there's like, you've got a certain, usually know that you've got like 2 more books or 4 more books, but you don't always know if there's going to be any after that. And so do you have to go into that? And you're working on the last book in the chunk you have now.
Right.
So have you had to go into that one thinking like, okay, how would I tie this up if there aren't more?
Well, I asked the editor, I said, I'm getting into the middle of a 3 book arc here. It's a subplot, compared to the main murder plot. But, it's going to leave it on a cliffhanger for the next book. Is that going to be a problem? And he didn't think it was going to be a problem. So I'm just going to do it.
Hopefully that means that you don't have to worry about it.
I know, hopefully.
So MG's asking several questions related to their particular work that they're working on, which we can't really go into too much in this particular interview. But I wondered if you have any favorite like craft books that you could recommend to people if they're working on their own work?
Yeah, I do. I love craft books. I just love them. I, buy them and read them once and put them back and get them out again a couple of years later.
Yeah.
One I really like is by Lisa Cron, Cron. It's called Wired for Story. And it really looks at what it is that hooks people into story. And then it talks about crafting a narrative based on that. And she also wrote another book that's popular, Story Genius, but I don't like Story Genius as much as Wired for Story. But a lot of people love Story Genius.
Yeah.
It's out more of a methodology for writing a story, and it just doesn't resonate with me.
Yeah.
I like James Scott Bell's books on craft. He's one on conflict that's really good, and one on plotting that is really good. And his tone is super encouraging. I like that. There's a book on editing I think is fabulous, The Intuitive Editor by Tiffany Yates Martin. And that really, that resonates with my own way of revising my work. And she's
Tiffany, you said?
Tiffany Yates Martin.
Okay. I'm going to put these in the
in show notes.
Information about the video too, so that people can come and get those later too.
Yeah. Those are some good ones, and I know I have other ones, some of them that are popular, like by the agent Don. Oh, see my brain. I've been zooming so much. It's just
okay. No worries. It's getting late.
Brain cells or something. Anyway,
this is a pretty good list. Yeah. So we can start with that. That's great. Thank you. And thank you, MJ, for asking, because I think that, it's helpful to remember that sometimes people are watching who are having their own writing questions, and it's good to
just like
hear who people like.
Go into your guys' bookstore, just like thumb through the books and look and see where it feels like they're talking to you.
Yeah. No, I love that, because I feel like the other thing I think is really important when people go look for craft books is there are a million, and they all have different approaches. They all have different ideas about how to do stuff, and some of them just aren't going to fit with your style of writing, and that's okay. I think sometimes when you're starting out and you read somebody's well recommended craft book, and you're like, oh, I have to do this because this person's really successful and they know what they're doing, and it doesn't work for you at all, and you feel like such a failure. And it's like, it's okay, because maybe that's just not how you approach writing, and you don't, maybe there's another book out there that will resonate more. So
right, because we all have a different style for getting to that same endpoint. It really depends on you and your brain, how you think about information, how you work, all of that. Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Angela. This was so much fun. I'm excited about getting to talk to you again later when the other books come out.
Well, those were great questions. I was really in the drilling. I didn't even hear the drilling.
Oh, good. It wasn't too bad, but it went for a little while. But well, thank you so much, and I will talk to you next time, and hopefully see you in the store soon. And everybody, sorry, I'm falling down on my book person job. We do have Angela's books in the store.
Yes.
Especially the new one. I will have to look and see if we probably need to reorder some of the first one in case someone wants to start the series. But we definitely have the newest one.
And I'm coming in to do a signing a week from Saturday.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. See, my brain's not there either. Yeah.
Say hi.
22nd, is that right?
That sounds about right.
I think it's Saturday the 22nd. So yeah, if you thank you. I'm so glad here I am, like the store employee, for getting to say this. But yeah, on July 22nd at, I believe we said 3, Angela's going to be in the store signing books. And so if you have any of her books and you want to get them signed, you can bring them in if you've already purchased the books. If you don't have them yet, we will have them at the store that you can purchase, and then have her sign and just say hello. And
I would love to talk to people. It's just, that's the most fun.
So MJ, if you have questions for Angela about, specific things about her writing and advice, that would actually be an okay place to bring a question. We might have to interrupt you to have other people get their book signed, and then you can start talking again, but that would be an okay place to come and ask those more personal questions. So please come and we will see you all later.
Thank you, Kristen.